Welcome to Ballsy, the podcast where I interview successful artists and creators on how they got the balls to sell their art and turn their practice into a profitable business. As a former entrepreneur turned artist, I realized that being an artist is basically like running a small startup. And you, the artist, are the CEO. I talk to artists about their businesses, talk real numbers, growth hacks, tools and tricks, and how they were ballsy enough to make that their career. Welcome to Ballsy, for those artists who have the balls to sell their art. Today we are fortunate enough to have Adrien, who now lives in Portland, but is known for some famous works out of Nashville, one of my favorite towns. So why don't we get started? Adrien, usually the way I like to start, tell folks, one, where they can find you so they can see your art as they listen to this on social channels, and then give us a little background of how we found you and how you got to where you are.
So social channels, really, I primarily just use Instagram, and that's asap.gif. So asap.gif, and it is GIF, graphic interface.
Not GIF?
So no, it's not GIF. In graphic image, if I don't want to get emails about that. Anyways, and then the website is basically the same, asapgif.com. And yeah, so I don't know how you found me, but a little background on me. I live in Portland. I essentially split my time because my dad is back in Nashville. Between that and different projects and stuff, because I'll still do work back in Nashville. I'm mostly based in Portland, but I'll go back anywhere from 4 to 6 times a year for different things. So yeah, I live in Portland now. I'm actually from Nashville. A lot of people have been moving there, but born and raised. Let's see, I went to school for music actually my whole life up until being a professional artist was spent in the music industry. Okay. My dad's in music. I went to Berkeley in Boston. I had this grand vision of following in the footsteps, so to speak, and I had a band all the way through college. We moved back to Nashville, and basically, if you've seen Spinal Tap, it's like that. Everything that could go wrong went wrong, but it's all good. It's all good. It was just some childish shit. Can we curse? Is that cool?
Yeah, curse away.
Okay. Fuck, shit, cock. No. Anyways, no. So we're young kids, and it didn't work out because it didn't work out. We probably honestly weren't that good, but they were fine. I'm not the best singer, so I didn't want to start another band. And right away, I'd always done the merchandise and the promotion, the marketing, the visual stuff. And so I just kept going down that path. Right out of high school, I took a year off and I started working Apple retail, and I kept that up all the way through college. So when I got out of college, I went back to the store, and all the stuff went down with the band, and I was working on the visual stuff. And I would, on my iPhone 4, show all of my friends, hey, look, I just made this thing. What do you think? And it was a mixed media thing. I would design stuff, and then I would screen print it, and then I would paint it. And I had a friend who was like, I don't need a painting, but if you put on a t-shirt, I buy it. So that's how my first business got started, which was design and apparel. And it was all stuff it was all my design. I wasn't doing freelance or whatever. And a couple months after that epiphany, I did this street festival in Nashville, and I made more in 8 hours than I did in a month at the Apple store. Maybe this is a sign. When I told my managers during conversation, you're doing so great, we can give you a 50-cent raise. And I was like, Johnny, I think I quit. And he'd known me.
No better feeling in the world.
Yeah, the best part was he'd known me since I was 18. So his response was immediate. He was like, yep, that's about right. You should quit. And I really appreciate him for that. I had no real plan other than this thing worked. And I was 23, so I thought, what else do you need? And I think I had $2,000 total in my bank account, which I thought would be enough to live off and start a business.
How we change.
Yeah. Somehow I did actually manage to do that, though. So I quit and I said, I'm going to start a design business. And I spent the next several months figuring out what that meant and sitting at a coffee shop in Nashville and just every day, just cranking out designs. I'd pick an idea, pick a theme, and started messing around in Photoshop, which, I mean, the most training I had in that was I had a class in my ninth grade digital graphics class. That was the extent of my training. So I'm sure that I still do a lot of things the wrong way. There's probably a lot easier ways to do it. But yeah, that's what I did for months. And I started any event I could, I'd show up and I'd sling t-shirts and prints and try and hawk my paintings. And then obviously the shirts were what was selling, so focused on that. And 2012, I officially launched my business, and it's called DCXV. And just did the same thing. Showed up at events, slinging shirts and prints.
Now, was it
in that time?
Was it only in person that you slung them, or did you do internet? Did you sell them on the web, or just strictly like at hand-to-hand combat?
I had a website, but I primarily, this was right about the time that social media or Instagram was starting. I think they started in 2010, 2011. So like I had that, but it wasn't quite what it is now. So a lot of it was in person. And I had the idea that if I designed some Nashville specific stuff, that could be the iPod, so to speak, the thing that would get people in the store to then look at everything else that I was doing, which proved to be correct, because at the time there wasn't anyone making any cool local apparel. And that was something I noticed. New York had that, LA has that, Chicago, all the big cities and big cities around the world, there's like the touristy kitschy stuff, but then there's the stuff that actual people who live there would even wear. So I started making a few things like that, and for a while that was the case, but eventually everyone just wanted the Nashville stuff because Nashville exploded. But yeah, around the same time period, end of 2011, beginning 2012, and I was just designing my ass off every day. I came up with this one design in the theme of the Nashville stuff and said, I believe in Nashville. It was inspired by a couple things. Nashville had a really devastating flood in 2010. So I noticed there was a lot of community sentiment, a lot of strong feelings, like personally, but also just in the city itself. And so I had been gestating on that. And then the 2012 election was super contentious, or so we thought at the time.
Right. Seemed it. If we only knew.
Yeah. So I wanted to do something that could just be a positive thing that whoever you are, you can get behind. Doesn't matter where you're from or what you believe in. It could just be something for everybody. And that was the idea. So I made this series and I thought to myself, I don't think this will work as a t-shirt. So maybe I'll put it up on a wall somewhere. And I'd never painted a mural or anything before, but I found a building in this area that when I was in high school is where you went to get drugs or get murdered. And then had started turning around about the time I started moving back. And there was a building that just had this big open parking lot, and there was a wall that faced the street, and that building they're renovating it, so it was just empty at the time. And I literally knocked on their door and said, hey, I have an idea, can I talk to you about it? And so I did, and they were really receptive, and I said, let's try it for a year, and at the end of the year, if you don't like it, I'll take it down. So the Howell family, really good people, they let me do it. And that was March 2012. I think in May, like right away, people started to take pictures with it. I think GQ came to town. They did a whole shoot in Nashville, and they used it as a backdrop for a couple photos. And it just picked up steam from there. And then as Instagram, or the version of Instagram that it has evolved into today, really started to take off, that's when you started seeing people making it a destination to come to when they were coming from out of town and line up. And I saw that's also about the time my business started shifting away from the demand for my design work versus I guess it's all my design work, but my artistic stuff versus the Nashville stuff, which in hindsight is a good learning experience as far as a business goes.
So question for you. You were still making art back then, but this kind of graphic and this Nashville signage just caught the power law and just went straight up.
Yeah, it's supply and demand, right? You can make what you want all day. It doesn't mean that anyone has to like it or buy it.
Correct.
And there was some internal artistic conflict there. That's probably just young, youthful, brash ego. But it was a very good educational experience in terms of from a business perspective, since this
Okay.
is a art business podcast. And yeah, it's hard. I should probably write all this down at some point, but I don't want to take up this entire hour talking about that. But needless to say, like in that time period for the next 5 or so years, I'm very grateful. A once in a lifetime experience. Like the image literally went around the world. It was in international publications. People from every continent that has people, when they came to Nashville, like they came to take their photo with it. And obviously I did well since I had the copyright and everything and the trademark. I essentially inadvertently had to learn how to build a brand and build a company. So that was really great experience. And then just cool stuff, man. Foo Fighters came to town, and Taylor, R.I.P. Taylor, got to meet him briefly. And then the next night he wore one of my shirts on stage at the Ryman. That's really cool. Wouldn't have gotten to do that any other way.
Look, I can almost hear a little hesitation. It was like a graphic thing. It was a tee. It turned into a business. But you're like I Love New York guy, right?
Your words, not mine.
But you created like a piece of art that became synonymous with the city, right? I know as an artist, you can probably think, oh, it's just like a t-shirt, whatever it is. But that was your art, man. That's super cool.
Yeah. From an art perspective, whether it's music or art or anything, it's so incredibly rare to have any level of success, let alone something to that scale. I can't even begin to fathom at this point how many people have seen it. I'm not even talking about come take their picture. I can't even fathom that. But you dream about it, but you never think it'll actually happen. And so I'm really super grateful for it. There's a lot of challenging moments and experiences, things I was not prepared for, did not know about. But the overall experience, I don't know how you couldn't be anything but grateful for that.
It's awesome. Now, so you have this business. You're obviously now kicking ass on this business, but obviously in your heart of hearts, you still have these artistic visions that you have that you want to create and make. And I assume you're creating art most of this time. Are you still creating art most of this time?
As anyone who is an artist or runs a business or is an entrepreneur knows, like most of your time is occupied by the business. I was not able to be as creative as I wanted to be. Murals were where I got to do that the most because people saw the success, I believe, in Nashville murals, and rightfully so, assumed that I painted murals. And I learned from my dad, you always just say yes. So when people ask me like, hey, do you want to paint a mural? I was, yes, I'll paint a mural. And I guess I'm all right at it because one thing led to another. And I got to do some really cool projects from that as well. I worked with a lot of really big companies or really interesting artists. That was the artistic output during that time. But besides, I would design stuff, but a lot of that design I never put out because the brand had transitioned more towards being Nashville focused. So that was the output there. I was designing a lot for myself. I just wasn't putting it out.
So you now have this journey. You have a business that's just, for all intents and purposes, churning cash. You get either the occasional mural job on the side. At what point did you decide, hey, I've had enough of this. I still want to pursue art for the sake of art's sake, and I want to be an artist?
Yeah, a couple of different things really led to that, which is 2017. And I guess this was also like where I realized that this had become, or I believe Nashville had become what it had become. So it got vandalized, which in any other city would not be a newsworthy occasion, or maybe it would be for like a day. But in Nashville, the city as a whole was very affected by this. Like it was in the news for several weeks.
Wow.
And on both sides, there's a lot of people who were personally hurt and offended and were like, how could anyone do this? And there's a lot of people who also, on the other side of it, were using it, I think, as a chance to let out their personal demons, which unfortunately got directed towards me. That was a very weird time, and I'm prone to anxiety like a lot of artists, so that did not help my mental health. Yeah, like I had, not to go too into it, but at one point the neighbors in the complex where I had my shop were, yeah, you're getting death threats. Can you please call the cops? We don't want anyone to come fuck up our shops too. Yeah. I'm sure my girlfriend at the time also, that was a heavy thing for her because it's like, who's going to show up at the house? Because somebody actually did show up at my house once.
Art gone bad.
Yeah. And I can reflect now and realize that probably has to do more with what's going on in their lives and not me personally. Like, what did I do to them? But at the time, it sure felt like that. So that was definitely like a moment where it's like, this isn't exactly what I intended to make my life's work
Yeah.
or to dictate my life. And one funny story though is that the mayor at when it happened called me, but my phone had blown up since I woke up that morning, so I put on do not disturb. And so she had to leave a message and I had to call her back, and I'm like, I'm really sorry I missed your call, Madam Mayor.
That's amazing.
Um, yeah, she's a real nice lady though. And yeah, so that was the first thing. And I realized it had become something bigger than anything I had control over. The symbol itself, separate from the commerce, meant something to people. And it's taken me a long time to wrap my head around it, but that's a real honor right there. You don't get to
Oh,
ever make that happen, that people decide for themselves.
yeah, that's incredible, man. And I
Yeah.
assume it's a dividend that'll just keep paying indefinitely.
I'll never count on it, but I'm always appreciative of it when it does happen.
It's awesome.
That's about when it's like, all right, I got to figure this out because this business is not what I set out to do. Also, I didn't really set out to do anything other than work for myself. So I was like, I got to figure out what it is that I want to do. And just like I said, it got to a point where it's like, I got to get myself in a good spot mentally because I can't keep this up forever the way it is currently. And so I reached a point where I decided to sell the brand.
Okay.
Financially, it was good, but also really at the end of the day, I started thinking bigger picture of at one point, I literally thought to myself, artists don't have a great track record of living happy, productive lives. Is this the thing that I'm going to kill myself over?
Okay.
And I was like, I think I can do better.
Great.
No, that's a little tongue in cheek, but really what it came down to is like, this is not worth anything so drastic as that. I feel like I can do more and be happier. And I feel like I've done what I could hope, more than I could hope for with it in creating it. And like you said, I think people at that point, it's going to keep going off on its own from an artistic standpoint. So I decided to sell that and move on. And really that year afterwards was really tough, processing all of the craziness that had happened. And also it in some ways cost me that relationship. So processing that. And I had a meeting with a mentor and a friend of his at the time, and his friend, I was just saying what I'd done and what I like to do. And she was like, okay, so you're an artist, so you should probably just be an artist. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. I was like, yeah, I'm an artist, but I got to have a gambit. And
you got thrust into it so quickly. So your connection of art to business was like intertwined from the get-go, but in slightly adjacent to like art world stuff. I could see where that like to mentally get back there was probably not the easiest trip.
my rule from when I started the business and still now is to never try to make money. So I think if you try in anything artistic, if you're trying to make money, you're going to make bad art. The trick is once you make good art, then change out your hats and be like, all right, how do I then make this into a business? How do I sell this? And because anyone who thinks that art is not a business is not an artist, in my opinion. And maybe it's just me, but I think there's an art to the business side of it as well. I got both sides of the brain going on that. So I get excited by both things, creatively and then business wise. It triggers the same part of my brain. So that was like 2018, 2019. And 2019, I'd done a few things here or there, but 2019, I rented a space from my friends. They let me do whatever I want. And they're just like, here you go. We're not using it. And I put on this ridiculous exhibition. There's a video of me painting this mural. It's a full 360 all mural, like all the walls and the floor. And there's a couple other installations. And inside I had took all the paintings I'd been painting and hung them up all over. I was really into the idea, I was just annoyed or bitter or whatever, but I was really into the idea of leaning into what success and influence and all the Instagram stuff, when it was like transitioning to influencer is a job. And that's not a knock against influencers. I have friends who are influencers, but I was like, man, what is Instagram doing to our society? What is it doing to art? I don't know that I like this. So I really like playing with a bit, and even if no one else is aware of the bit. And so that was my bit, is this is going to be a ridiculous fabrication of, yeah, influencer. So I hired a bunch of cocktail waitresses, and they walked around with glasses of champagne and bottles, really nice bottles, but in the back we're actually pouring Trader Joe's champagne, which is actually really good, by the way. It had a champagne selfie station where people could buy bottles to then spray it themselves in front of a wall that said,
Oh, I like
you
that.
post too much. Yeah, it was really fun. And so it was a really good time. So I put on this thing. It was a successful event. I did a bunch of shows. And then right when I was like, you know what, I really need to like focus on this and lean into this if I'm going to make this my new business in painting and whatnot. And then I came back from a trip to Southeast Asia in the beginning of 2020. And there you go. That's what happened. Great time to start a new business.
Yeah.
I will say that I was very successful at the stay-at-home part.
As many of us were. So the style and aesthetic you have now is a little different than the more graphic stuff you were doing back then. Now, we're going to take a turn here to your new work. And obviously, people can see it on Insta. What are your main categories of work? Is it just paintings, or do you do prints? Do you do editions? Like, what kind of works are you selling these days?
I've been selling mostly paintings. I've been fortunate to do that, in private. And as much as I gripe about Instagram, oftentimes it can start from a DM.
Yeah, almost always.
But yeah, I'm also doing art fairs here and there. Stylistically, yeah, very different. It's definitely been an evolution, and also the pandemic was good for that, because I felt Goku and Dragon Ball Z. I went into the hyper chamber, and it's 1 year equals, or 1 day equals 1 year, and you just train all the time. So I feel like my work technique and the style just really evolved a lot in 2020 and 2021. A lot of it is very abstract, or abstract impressionism, if you will. Color has always been a very natural, intuitive thing for me. I pushed that, and in the pandemic, I had this idea to, like the great impressionist painters, right? I'm going to paint the sunset every day. And I did that, but all I really primarily had was, and what I was used to using, was spray paint. So I got really good at using spray paint in very diffuse ways and creating gradients and either super smooth textures or very heavy textures. And I still enjoy that. And the gradient stuff is a big part of my work. Mostly, I think, because it's meditative, can sometimes be a struggle while doing it. But then the end result is like this very serene, peaceful visual. And then it often leads to a discussion of sorts where people see it and they're like, wow, that makes me feel this, or this makes me think of that. And I think that's the other side of my work, is I like the communication aspect. I like connecting and hearing how people interpret the work. To me, once I've done it, right? On to the next one. But yeah, so my work is very much abstract expressionism. I did also start getting into painting figures, and that does call back to my design background more. So I'll design the figure and then paint it, and then use those painting techniques in creating that piece. But lately, I've kind of taken, not the figure stuff, but I've been incorporating more form into my work, because the abstract gradient stuff can be very just like amorphous and just like floaty or whatever, which is great. But I've started incorporating that either in kind of creating geometric or competing gradients, and then going a little further and essentially taking inspiration from mosaics and pixel art. A lot of the work I've been making this year has been inspired by that. One of the more recent commissions I had was a large version of that, where essentially I made a gradient, but make it pixel.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I like
yeah,
your gradient work a lot. That's probably where I found, like, I'm very attracted to that kind of, the kind of very gentle gradients. Those always intrigue me. Now, so it's mostly one of one originals for the most part.
I am starting to do more prints.
Okay.
I found these people who can appropriately scan my work, because that's the one thing about this technique, or the technique I have, is you can't just take it's really hard to capture. Like, you can take a photo, sure, but if you were to do like a high res scan to then reproduce it can ruin the effect,
Okay.
and it can show a lot of the breaks or the different
Right. The subtlety.
layers. Yeah, the subtleties which your eye is naturally covering over. And these folks are really good at getting right in between. So you're getting all the detail, but then making the colors, capturing them in such a way that it reproduces it how you would see it if you were in front of the actual piece. So I'm starting to do more like that.
Okay.
And I guess because, like we were talking about, the two sides of the brain, I can't shut off the business side. And it's a blessing, I guess, that I've achieved any level of success already in art. So I think it allows for me to be like, my art is my art, and I have no control over how it's perceived. So my fine art, I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to keep trying to grow it. I'm going to do all of that. But these other ideas I have, instead of trying to shoehorn them into my fine art, which is very jarring, it's, here's this large abstract sunset painting, and then, oh yeah, here's some highly detailed illustration that I came up with, or here's this really funny sticker that I just wanted to make. So I've now hit on an idea of creating a house, a design house, a studio, whatever you want to call it, business brand, for all that other stuff that it's not going to have my name on it. It's my thing, but there's Adrien, the fine art, and then there's my new brand, whatever you want to call it, and that'll house everything else. And that's where I can get weird. I got this one shirt, it literally just says fuck on it, but it doesn't actually say fuck. It, you know what it says, but it technically doesn't say it.
So
And
old connection shirts that's spelled it right backwards.
exactly. Yeah. And I have this really dumb but funny idea for a commercial that, sort of think like 90s Calvin Klein commercials, black and white kind of thing. So that's one of my fun projects for the summer. I'm just going to make this silly video and put it out there. And if people also want to buy the shirt, they can buy the shirt.
Yeah.
That's what I'm working on now, is kind of like defining the two columns.
And you keep yourself, they both keep you somewhat interested. Would you consider yourself prolific? Do you make a lot of art, or does it take weeks? Like, are you a piece a day kind of guy? Are you a piece a week, a piece a month?
I tend to work in sprints. So I'm always thinking, I'm always like writing stuff down. And because my music background, like oftentimes it's like words or phrases or lines, and I'll write those down and then I'll pair them when I create a visual. I'm like, this kind of feels like that. So I'm always doing stuff like that. Or if there's a color scheme or palette or whatever I see in my head, I'll either mock it up real fast in Photoshop or I'll write it down. As far as actual painting, though, I am about to get into a production mode, and like I'm building a lot of canvases right now, getting some panels made up, and I'll probably spend 2 months or so just painting. Sometimes a couple hours a day, sometimes all day. But I'd say my abstract stuff, if I'm really in that mode, I could bang out, depending on the scale of it, a piece a day or a piece every couple days. My figure stuff can take anywhere from, if I'm only doing that, like a week to a month.
Okay.
And the more form I incorporate, the longer it takes, because the design background in me, I'm very precise. I use X-Acto knives and razors and a lot of tape, a lot of masking.
Okay.
That takes a lot of time. But yeah, I'm trying to, as I get older, create a healthier work balance rather than just binging or sprinting all the time. But yeah, still haven't quite got there yet.
Now, because of your background and the fact that you've had this other art adjacent business, where do most of your sales come from? Do you have an email list that you've built over time? Are you mostly galleries? Are you mostly online? What are the channels that seem to be serving you best?
for me, like I said, the last couple of years has really been a rebuilding period, if you will, and really been in the woodshed most of the time. I have been doing art fairs and then building a network that way, largely through social media. So again, people following me and then DMs. I am working on being better about emails. That's something I need to prioritize more, simply because, every time they change the algorithm, you're fucked. So the email, your website, that's the domain you have control over. So that's something I want to prioritize more. I'm really an in-person kind of guy, but I'm trying to figure out how to translate that to social media. There was a time period where I was super heavy on social media, and I've really been enjoying not being that way. But it's a necessary tool, right? Like, I don't deride social media as like a all-encompassing evil. I think it's evil how it incorporates itself into daily life and how unaware to yourself allow it to dictate your life. But it's work. I think taking control of how I use social media and really prioritizing it as a tool, especially marketing tool, is the necessary path going forward in terms of increasing sales and followers and all of that. There's just no way around it right now. I don't see us putting the genie back in the bottle. So
For sure not. No, and for all intents and purposes, it works pretty well. Are you on any other platforms besides Instagram, or is that like your focal point of attention?
I technically have a TikTok. I need to make more videos, more content. Yeah, I don't know, I've been very fortunate that people have had an interest and supported me in this time period. But like I said, it's been a rebuilding phase. And now just recently in the last 9 months or so, have I started to have more of a clearer picture of, okay, this is what that is. Here's how we're going to grow them. And so that's where I'm at, because I'm really blessed to be able to do what I do. But like anyone who does their own thing, like, I know I can do more. I want to do more. I want to find contentment, but I know I can do better, and I'll be content when I start doing better. I don't know. That's the business in me.
Yeah, when you run an enterprise, you can always, like, I don't know, contentment, it's fading. Like, you're content until you're at the top of the next mountain, and then you realize you're not content anymore. And then you think that the place that you always dreamed about getting that would solve all your woes. And then you get there and you're like, I could really probably do a little better.
I feel like that's still there. I'm more self-aware, so I try not to let it affect me as much, certainly not in a negative way. But it's like how my gradient pieces are meditative in their own way. I find it's more the process that I really enjoy of creating. And once I've created it, it's like, all right, what's the next thing that I can create? What can I work on? Because it's fine if you want to just do something to do it. I feel like that's a hobby, and hobbies are wonderful.
Right.
Like, I love to cook. I'm not going to open a restaurant. But
far as like,
yeah, I think about it a lot, but I'm not going to do it.
Good choice.
Yeah. But no, that's really it, right? Is if you enjoy the process and you enjoy playing the game, so to speak, then it isn't about, I want to do better so I can do better financially. That comes with it, ideally. But it's more that I did this and I did it well. What's the next thing I can do from this? How can I grow it? And I find that process, whether it's in the marketing sales aspect of it or the actual creative process, that's really what I find enjoyable. And
that said, and being that you are like that business guy, what percentage of your life is actual artistic creation versus all the things that are required to do said artistic creation? Or do you have a little more freedom now because you have an accretive exit event, so your pace is a little slower, or do you like drive yourself to the bone regardless?
I would say my artistic, like the percentage of my day that is, or cumulative time that is artistic, is probably 10 to 20% actual production.
Yeah.
Now, if you're counting the conceptual thing, right? Because I primarily paint, but I also enjoy designing. I'm starting to do more with the photos that I've taken. I also work from photos a lot. So like at some point I was like, I feel like I could do something with these photos. And then the installation work I've done in the past, I really enjoy doing. I want to do more of that, whether it's murals or 3D installations or whatever. But if you count that, then who knows, man? I mean, because I can't stop thinking. I'm
Yeah.
trying to find the off switch. I can't find the off switch. But actual production, 10 to 20%. Business is probably 50 to 60%, maybe 70. And it all depends what you're counting as business, all the not fun stuff. And then there's some fun stuff as well. I do enjoy figuring out logistics, and then there's probably 10% of just who knows.
Fair. I'm always like I think I've yet to find an artist who's much above 60 or 70%. And that's like super rare. I always find, I don't think people appreciate how much of art has little or nothing to do with actual art. Are there any tools or software things you use to keep track of? Do you keep track of your inventory, or is it like just a spreadsheet, or are you more sophisticated with it? Or like, how do you go about inventory and keeping track of collectors, keeping track of works, or is that like an afterthought?
Not an afterthought. I think that's just smart practice, whatever you do, especially these days, everything is data driven. So I am still fairly old school. I will use a spreadsheet. I know there are other resources out there, definitely open to it. For me, for right now, the spreadsheet still works.
Okay.
I need to probably spend a week and really just go over all the software and options out there and pick a system. But for right now, spreadsheet still works for me. It's hard to beat it. And
yeah, Google Docs
at the end of the day,
Google Docs work.
Exactly. I think I read a Rolling Stone article about Eminem a couple years ago where he was like, "Oh yeah, I don't have a cell phone." And I think the interviewer pointed out that it's because he has a guy who has a cell phone for him. So that's a life goal of mine as well, to have someone who can have a cell phone for me. But in relation to what you're asking, I think the biggest thing I took out of my first business is I see now how to build a business. And of course, you're always going to make mistakes, but that's what I want to do now, is build the next machine. And this time around, have somebody else to maybe keep track of the inventory, of the clients, of the projects, because that's the downside to the time we live in. Yes, you have the resources to do everything yourself. Everybody does. It is not possible for us as humans at this current stage of evolution to actually do everything yourself. You can do it. Ron Swanson says, was it Ron Swanson? Yeah. Anyways, you can't half-ass a problem. You have to whole-ass a problem. And that's, I think, very true. So the smartest thing you can do is, what are the things that you are not good at? And as soon as you can, find someone who is good at that, who does enjoy that, who can focus on it.
So that's a great segue into question. Obviously, from your business, you've seen and realized that. Have you started to build a team yet, or are you just not there to the point where you think it's necessary or required? Have you, and if and as you build your team, what are the places where you feel that you would probably get the most bang for your buck?
Yeah, not there yet. I want my sales to be, as far as my art goes, to be better.
It's usually just try.
Yeah, and there's the double-edged sword, or I guess it works in my favor. It's not a negative, or the dueling things I have of my fine art, and then my more design-based stuff is that if I can get the design stuff to grow, because that's going to have a broader appeal than my fine art. If I can bring somebody on board to manage that there, it's not going to be that much harder to add in. Yeah. So that's how I'm thinking about it. In terms of like, where would I hire? I'd probably an operations person. I'm definitely like the ideas, as much as I tried not to be for most of my career, especially these days with social media, like, you are the brand, you are the personality, you have to be. And I've been told that is one of my skills, is that I'm good with people. So I need to prioritize that more and be out front more, engage more. I'm really good at the empathetic side of marketing, understanding people. The nuts and bolts of building a profile or whatever for who are we trying to reach or whatever. That's, can
I'm
I
the
do it?
fucking
Yes.
worst at it.
I hate it.
I'm the
Yeah.
like finding the avatar, and I'm the worst at that shit.
Yeah. Not my skill set, not natural to me, don't enjoy it. So those are probably the two areas I would hire right away, which is operations and the actual implementation of the marketing. Coming up with the crazy idea that's going to capture people's attention, that I can do. I do that all day. But actually then delivering it via the right channels digitally to reach people, that's not my favorite thing.
Now, do you do stuff like digital ads and things like that, or do you do mostly organic stuff? Have you ever experimented and played with things along those lines, or do you like it's not in your purview?
I don't find them particularly useful. I see artists who seem to be doing well with it.
I get a lot of art ads also, like artist ads. I never know if they, I always text people, ask if they work. No one ever answers me.
Exactly. So that's the thing is even when I build my own audience and really fine tune it and run it by friends who do marketing, digital marketing for a living, I still, a lot of the times, the response I get is often from other artists. And I don't know about you, but like, I like art. I don't buy that much art because I'm too busy reinvesting in myself to keep making art.
Correct.
So as much as I appreciate the support of the artistic community and people liking what I do, that's not who I'm trying to reach. And I also think that for the type of fine art that I've been building towards and working towards over the last several years, my audience, they're on Instagram. That's not where they go to buy. They might see it there. They might start following you there. So it is useful in that way. But are they going to see an ad and be like, you know what? I'm going to buy that right now. No, they're probably going to see it at an art fair. They're going to hear about you from their friend, or they're going to be maybe on the For Me page or whatever it's called. They'll see you there. They'll start following you. It's a longer process. It's not like an impulse decision. If I'm selling a painting for 10 grand or 15 grand, whatever it is, I'm going to guess that for most people, that's not an impulse purchase, not because of the money, but maybe because of, will this physically fit in my space? I'm not at the level yet where people are collecting me just to stick in a vault somewhere in the hopes that like I do something else and then they can sell it for 10 times more. So I still have people who have practical considerations, whether that's price or where's it going to go. So yeah, I think it can work. I think for smaller stuff, it can, for product, so to speak, prints, all that kind of stuff, it can be very good. For fine art, I've not had the most success with it. Like I said, I had the most success when I'm just like in front of people.
Yeah. Here's a story to tell. So we're actually getting close to the end of our hour. So I usually like to wrap up and ask similar questions to everybody. And the first set is a pair. It's one side to the other. One is, what was, if you can recall, what was like the biggest mistake or regret of your career that you really thought that like you felt set you back, whatever it is. And then on the opposite side, what do you think like the best decision you ever made was? So two sides of a coin of best and worst for your art career.
Oh man, best was probably just deciding to say, to have the confidence of youth to think that I could start a business based solely around my creative output with no business experience and no money. And yet I was like, yeah, of course I could do that. So that's probably the best decision.
Okay. And I'm going to just plug here, having the balls to sell art. Got it in there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I got to say, I definitely have some advantages there. I grew up in the entertainment industry. I was around it my whole life. My mom's a visual artist. She's a painter. My dad's a musician. And so for better or for worse, there was no one in my family who was like, that seems illogical. That's not practical. It was all like, yeah, why wouldn't you do that?
That's awesome. So few people have that kind of go get them support. Like it's so important.
Yeah. My brother's the same way. He's a musician. He's doing very well with his project. And I think it's some nature and then some nurture as well. But that's probably the best decision, was just deciding to do it. And also got to thank in support of the people at Apple at the R123 Apple Green Hills, that store in Nashville. Because when I started working there, I was 18 and I was the 23rd person hired for that store. So I don't know, it became kind of like their kid brother. So when it came time for me to quit, they were beyond supportive. They were like, you need to do this. We think you can do this. So I can't say that I was like, yeah, I'm going to go out there and move mountains on my own, because no one does that. But really, it was a combination of that support from my friends and my family, and then also just not knowing any better and deciding to do it. That's probably the best decision. I've had enough time now where I don't know that there is a worst decision, because it's whether in the moment it was a disaster, but now I've learned a lesson from it, or it worked out, but maybe I would have liked to done it this way. I can look back and be like, I'm in a pretty good spot. Actually, what I will say, and it has nothing to do with the business directly, the worst decision was not knowing better, because I was still young, but letting it affect me and letting my identity be tied up in the business.
Happens to all of us, man.
Yeah. And that became overwhelming at points. And who knows if decisions would have been made differently or not, but it definitely really caused a lot of stress and pain in that time period. And so I think could have handled it better, and that would have allowed me to handle other aspects of my life better. And that's a lesson I think you learn the hard way.
Have to.
I'm not saying that I would consider myself that successful or whatever, but Bill Murray has a good quote, which is, whenever someone becomes successful, they got 2 years where they're just an asshole. And I think that is true.
Probably pretty accurate.
I know there are definitely things in my life I could have handled better, and I could have been better to myself. I could have been a lot nicer to myself, I think. So I've been reflecting a lot on this stuff lately, because as I get ready to, I feel more concretely that I have the idea, the foundation for business 2.0 than I ever had since business 1.0. And so I've been reflecting a lot on this kind of stuff. And I think that's really what it is, all right, if we're going to do this again, it can take a lot out of you. And
sure.
I'm prepared for that. But part of that is making sure that I let myself be good to myself and the people around me.
I was going to ask you how you define success, but being an asshole for 2 years is the best one I've ever heard. So on that note,
I will say, because I can't take credit for that, I just think it's true. But I don't know. Success for me at this point is just being able to keep doing what I'm doing and keep take care of myself and my friends and my family. That's about it.
It's great, man. On that note, we will end on the high note of the day. You have done what so many of us and what we want, which is having the balls to do it. You have to put yourself out there to get what you want. And this is a super cool story. And the fact that you're like synonymous with the city, I think that's so fucking cool. You're tangentially connected.
Yeah.
Regardless. Anyhow, for those who are listening again, don't forget his socials are ASAP GIF, and you can find Adrien there and all his works and the things he's working on. Do you have any shows or anything big coming up that we should be aware of, or just you're going to trickle it out as it goes?
I have this show I do back in Nashville. It's an art fair at my old high school, a really great art fair they do called Art Eclectic. So I do that in October. I might have squeeze another one in there down in LA in September. Honestly, the last year or so has been a really weird year for me, where I've been essentially a nomad living out of a suitcase. I finally am back in Portland and setting up a new place, a new studio. So this summer is really going to be focused on that and getting with my art, getting back into production, and with the business setting it up. Yeah,
Great,
business
man.
2.0. Let's do it.
We look forward to it. So everybody keep your eyes out. Big things on the horizon and new works to match. So thank you, everybody. This has been Ballsy, having the balls to sell art. Thank you, Adrien. And we will keep an eye out for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.